In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to change the colors in images. The first step is to download the images that I gave you on the website, to put them into a folder called Adobe Lesson 3, and then to open up these two images in Adobe Photoshop. So open up Adobe Photoshop CS6, do an open, and in your Lesson 3 folder, select both the Ponte Lake and the Roger images, and then click Open. Both the images should open. If you receive a message like this, just say OK, and don't worry about it. You should have the two images. One should be of Roger, and the other should be of Ponte at a Lake. So select the one with Ponte at the Lake, and we're going to work with this first. Now, in order to make this image look much better, we're going to have to use many different commands in the image menu. You'll notice that this image has some problems with it. Ponte looks very, very dark in shadow here. There's a very bright background, and so it's not going to be easy to do the corrections. Also, you'll notice that the color is kind of washed out and green because he's under a green canopy of leaves. So we want to restore his original colors, and we want to make the color much more balanced. Now I'm going to go to the image menu, and I'm going to first go to a very easy setting, one that you shouldn't use, but I'm just going to show you how it works. This one is called exposure. This setting allows you to set the image so that it appears brighter or darker, as if you would set the camera that way when you were taking the picture. However, in this case, you'll notice that it doesn't work very well. If we make the photograph bright enough so that Ponte stands out, you'll notice that the background is far too bright. That is not good, and there's really not much we can do to fix that and make it work out better. No amount of fooling around here will really do a very good job. So we're not going to do the exposure. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the image menu, and we're going to go to adjustments. And the first thing we're going to do is all the way down here, it's called shadows and highlights. This is something that you can use if you have a photograph like this one, where there are bright parts and dark parts, and you want to deal with them separately. So it should appear like this. If your options are shown like this, then you probably want to turn them off. Do not show more options, because all you need are these two controls. So this shadows slider will change the brightness of only the dark areas. It'll leave the light areas alone. 35% is a good value for this. The highlights will then change only the bright areas and make them either brighter or darker. So you can deal with each part separately. You can make the dark areas brighter and the bright areas darker. So I'm going to use the values of 35% and 50%, and then I'm going to click OK. Now immediately we can see a big difference from before. If you go over to the History palette over on the right-hand side, you'll notice that all of our steps are highlighted here. But this one right here shows the original image. You can click on this to see the original image, and then click back to see the changes that you've made. So once again, if I click on the original image, we see it looks like that, and now the change that we made is that. So you can see that there's a very big difference between the two. The image is still not very good, however. It's a little bit washed out. So we're going to go to the next step, which is in the image menu, again under adjustments. But this time we're going to go straight to the top, and we're going to do brightness and contrast. Brightness and contrast are two settings. They are just like what they sound. The brightness will make it brighter or darker. The contrast will make the colors either more gray or more vivid. So the settings that I'd like to do here is to bring the brightness up to about 50%. Now you'll notice that the background goes back to a point which is very similar to what it was at first, and that's okay. That looks natural. Now the contrast I'm going to put at plus 10% to make it stand out a little bit more. And so that's good enough for right now. Again, it's still not perfect, but we're going to adjust it more using some other settings. So click OK. All right, the next thing we're going to do is in the image menu, Again, under Adjustments, we're going to go to Hue and Saturation. In Hue and Saturation, we've got three controls. One controls the hue, that is to say, it'll allow us to change the overall color cast of the image. Saturation will allow us to go from black and white to way too vivid colors. And the lightness, which we're not going to use right now, will make it darker or lighter. So I'm going to set these to 0 again. And then for the hue, let's go from -10. And when you do that, you'll notice that Ponta becomes a little bit more orange. If I go back to 0, you can see that it becomes a little bit more yellow. But if I go to 10, parts of his fur turn much more natural orange. So that's good for the hue. I'd like to make the color stand out a lot more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the saturation to +25%. And that brings the colors out quite a bit more. All right, so once you've done that, click on OK. And so the next one is going to be in the Image menu under Adjustments, but this one is going to be Color Balance. Color Balance allows you to control the red, green, and blue values of the dark areas of the image, the mid-tone or average areas of the image, and the highlights or the bright areas of the image. So for example, if I do bright blue highlights, you can see that it looks like a very bright blue light has been shined on it. If I go to the shadows and I do the same thing, you'll notice that it's the darker colors that have become more blue. Of course, we're not going to do anything that extreme, but I'm going to begin in shadows. So the first one I'm going to adjust is the first color level, the cyan and red, and I'm going to make that -10%. That gives us a slightly more blue cast, but this is for the shadows. So this is something that we're going to balance out. You're going to have to balance some of these, go a little bit in one direction in the shadows, a little bit in the other direction in the midtones. So be patient and wait for the final thing to see how this is going to look. I'm also going to go -10% in magenta and green. That'll take it away from the green a little bit. And then I'm going to bring the blue out. This will bring more contrast. If I set the blue, you'll notice that the ground got a little darker. And now we have colors which actually look somewhat more natural. But I'm going to go to midtones now and make some more changes. In the midtones, I'm going to set the first level to 20%. That's going to bring out the reds quite a bit more, and that's appropriate because Ponta's fur is red. You might want to watch the colors back up here because they turn into a more natural brown for the background, and that's actually very good. It tells us that we're on the right track. The middle balance, I'm going to keep 0, and then the yellow-blue, I'm going to change that to -10% to give us a little bit more yellow to make us fur a little bit more orange. And then finally, under highlights, I'm going to change this to 20%, plus 20% for the red. Again, make the bright areas a little bit more red, and then -20% for the last value, and that's going to bring out the yellow quite a bit more. So now you'll notice that the colors really are jumping out at you. Some people might think this is a little bit too much. If you want, you could try for something more muted, perhaps -10 would work here as well. I've just decided to go from -20 and make it a little bit more vibrant. So you'll have adjusted the shadows, midtones, and highlights. Once you're finished with that, click OK. So you can see the image is now completely changed. The original image, again, if you go to the History palette over here, and if you click on the original was very washed out, very green, very boring, but then we changed it in several steps, and we really made it into a completely new picture. This shows you how much information is in a photograph that you normally cannot see. Even if the photograph looks dark or washed out, there's a lot that you can do to bring out the image and make it look much, much better. So that's all that I want you to do for this photograph. So the next step is to make the image smaller. We're working with a very large image. If we make it full size, this is the size. I'd like to make it much smaller. So let's go to the Image menu, and go to image size. And let's change this so that the width is 1200. That's the smaller dimension. And the height should change to 1800. Click OK. You can do Control-0 to bring it back into the center if it went out like it did for me. And now we can see the picture again. If we do full size, it looks like this. If we fit it inside the window, it looks like that. That's Control-1 as a keyboard shortcut and Control-0. All right, so now let's go to the File menu and let's click on Save for Web. Here, we want to make sure that it's being saved as a JPEG. The quality can be 70 or 80, doesn't matter which one, but either one is okay. 60 would probably work as well, but let's just do 70 or 80. The photograph should be about 1 megabyte now. And then just click Save. Make sure you're going to save it in the Adobe Lesson 3 folder. This one, of course, should have a different name than the one before, so we're going to change the name to Ponte Better. And we're going to save it in the same place as we have those original ones. So I'm going to click Save, and now it's been saved. So now I'm going to close this image, but you've got to remember this image is still Ponte Lake. So when you say for the program to close it, I'm going to do a Control-W. You could also do File menu and then Close. But if you do Control-W, it'll ask you if you want to save this. And you want to say no, because if you saved it now, it'll save over the original version. We want to keep the original version. We already saved it as an alternate version. So when you do that, you should now see the image of Roger. So we're going to do something a little bit different here. And the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to select Roger and we're going to separate him from the background. Now you might want to zoom in a little bit more so you can get Roger in the image a little bit more completely. I just did one Control plus to get him to be that big. You don't have to, but that's a good idea. I'm going to go over to the Tools palette and I'm going to choose the Quick Selection tool right here. Make sure that it's on Quick Selection. If it's Magic Wand, make sure you change it to the Quick Selection tool. Up here in the toolbar, I want to make sure that the selection is set to add, not subtract or new selection. And then I want to make sure that the size that I'm using is about 10 pixels. You could use larger, but I found that 10 is pretty good for this situation. Okay, so now that I've got that set, I'm going to select Roger. So you can do this in many swipes. You can click once and then you can click again, and each time it'll add. I'm not going to do it that way though. I'm going to start and I'm going to kind of like draw or paint in around the top of his head so I can get his hair hopefully cleanly in the picture. So you might want to paint the parts that don't quite get in there. Doesn't have to be exact, but it should be fairly close. And then just keep on painting down and down. You'll find that the selection very naturally tends to do what you want it to do. If you do too much, you can undo that, or you can start over again by typing Control-D to deselect. But I'm going to continue, and I'm going to get his shirt here and go across over to here. I notice that when I do this, I get a little bit of extra over here. We're going to get rid of that in a minute. We'll get a little bit of extra here as well, but let me show you how that works. Here we go, getting a shoulder, and now you can see I've got a little bit extra there. So the way that we set this up, anytime we click, we add, but there's a way that you can subtract. If you hold the Option key, or the Alt key, sorry, Option is for Macintosh, but on Windows it's the Alt key. If you hold that down, then you can then click and drag to erase parts, just like that. And I'm going to erase this part in here as well. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click and drag over this area until I've got rid of most or all of that. And now everything looks great. Now I've got them pretty much perfectly. That's exactly how I want it to be. Okay, so the next step is to copy him and paste him into a new layer. You might notice that in the Layers palette, there's only one layer. It's the background layer. But now that we've made this selection, we can do a copy. Again, do not right click and copy here because that's a little bit more complex. We're not going to do it that way. Instead, you'll want to either go up to the edit menu and you can copy from there, or my favorite, just do a Control-C. Now you've copied them to the clipboard and you can now do a Control-V, V as in victory. And now you've pasted just Roger into the layer 1 layer. So you can see this more clearly if you click on the eye next to the background, making the background disappear, and now only Roger is visible. Now Roger is still in that original layer, the background layer, but we've covered him up with another copy of him. So now any change that we make in the background is going to show up behind Roger. So click on the background layer, and we'll want to go to the image menu again, and we'll want to go to adjustments, and we're going to take away all the color in the background. We're going to make Roger stand out in color while the background is black and white. So I'm going to go to hue saturation, and this time the saturation is going to go all the way down to -100%. And once we do that and click OK, you'll notice that the rest of the image has gone black and white. Now it looks like his shirt has gone black and white, but really he's just got a gray shirt. If you look at it carefully, you can still see there's some color there, especially the tie is in color. But the background is still a little bit pronounced. So we're going to use something special, something we haven't done before, but this is fun when you get used to them. It's the filters. Now, the filter menu allows you to access a whole lot of special filters, but the one we're going to do is called blur, and we're going to go to something called Gaussian blur. This is kind of an extreme blur. So click on that. All right, so now you can see that the background has gone all blurry. Actually, all of the background has gone blurry, including Roger, but we're looking right now at the layer 1, which is above that, right here. Even though we've selected the background, we're affecting the background, but we can still see layer 1 above it. Okay, so if you're not seeing what the blur looks like in the photograph, you want to make sure you've clicked on the preview checkbox here so that you can see what it looks like. And you can see that it's a pretty big blur. You can do lesser of a blur, or you can do much more of a blur, but quite frankly, I think that 50 is just about right. So I'm going to switch this to 50, and that looks very, very nice. So I'm going to click OK, and now we've got that. So if I go back over here and if I make layer 1 invisible, that will take the sharper color Roger and we'll take him away. And you can see that this is what we did to the original image. We made it black and white and we blurred everything. But the overlaying image, the copy and paste that we did of Roger, that now stands out in color and it's separate. If you wanted to, please don't do this, but if you wanted to, you could pick him up and move him around wherever you wanted to go, but we're not going to do that. We're going to keep him in the same place. Now, as I said before, his shirt is a little bit washed out there, so we want to give him a nice blue shirt here. So again, we're going to go and make a selection, but first make sure that you have selected layer 1 in your layers palette. Then we're going to go to the quick selection tool again. You don't need to reset anything, just use the same settings as before. And this time only select his shirt and collar. If you've got some extra areas like right here or over here which seem to be sticking out, don't worry. When you let go, those things are going to automatically disappear. So now we've selected only his shirt and tie. And we're going to go again to the image menu, to adjustments, and we're going to go to hue and saturation. Now there's a feature here that we didn't look at before. It's called Colorize. Colorize means that you will introduce a significant color hue into what it is that you're doing. We're going to do Colorize. This is what they do to old movies to make black and white movies color. So when you click on Colorize, you'll notice that that we got a red tint here, or at least I do. I'm not sure if you have something different. I'd like to make that blue, so I'm going to move it up to 240. And the saturation works for me, so I'm going to keep the saturation at 25. And that's all we want to do for the shirt. Click OK. And now you can see after you deselect, you've got a very, very nice blue shirt for Roger there. And that's what we want to do with the image. So this is certainly a different image. It is not necessarily better, it's just more stylized. If you take a look at the original and then go back down to see what we did, you'll see that there's a big difference in how the image looks. Now there's a lot of different things that you can do. You could go into filter and try out some of the other filters. There's some really interesting ones in there. You'll want to play around with that quite a bit, but not in this image. You'll probably want to do that in the test image that you do after this one. So once again, you want to set the image size. So go to the image menu and go to image size. Again, we want to make the wider portion, or the longer aspect of the image 1800, and the narrower portion 1200. This time it's reversed from what we had before. Click OK, and the image will be smaller. Control 0 will fit it in the window. Control 1 shows you the true size. And then go to the File menu, go to Save for Web, and then make sure again it's being saved as a JPEG. 70 or 80%, 60 is also okay. This one's much smaller in size. There's a lot less detail, I suppose. Since we blurred it, that's going to take down the size quite a bit. 310 kilobytes, that's good. Click Save. And this one is going to be called Roger Blue. And again, save it in the Adobe Lesson 3 folder. And those are the specific instructions I gave you for this particular lesson. Now, you still have one more step. As you can see in the instructions, I ask you to repeat a similar process with another photo. So you're going to want to take another photo or locate a photo that you already have. It should be one of your photos, and place it in the Adobe Lesson 3 folder. So make sure you name it with your name and the word original in it. Open it in Photoshop, and then do something similar to what I did, either with the Ponta image or the Roger image, and change the colors, the shadows, the highlights, the hue, the contrast, the brightness, the saturation, the color balance. So just go through and do whatever you think is necessary to make the image look better or more interesting. You can do what I did in this image, where you took one part of it and you lifted it out of the image so that you could paint it separately. You can use filters. So just be creative, have some fun, and see what you can do with your own image. And then save that also in the Adobe Lesson 3 folder. Make sure that you keep the original photo and then have an adjusted version of that same photo. And that's it for Adobe Lesson number 3.